So we'll start off with a small introduction to the students, and towards the end we'll have a small question and answer session with the students. And they'll come up to the laptop and answer questions to the cam. So we'll start off with a small introduction right now.
Okay. I think it's afternoon your time, right?
Okay, today we have with us Mr. Soud Hyder, platform leads at the AJ Plus on mobile strategy. He is responsible for bridging mainstream media with emerging media, developing and executing last mile distribution and engagement solutions, managing the Speak series of projects, identifying opportunities, formulating strategies, and executing pilots for new and emerging media that will enhance distribution and promote audience management. So you can start.
All right. Yeah. Hi guys. It's nice to have this opportunity to speak to you guys over thousands of miles. And yeah, pretty much I am the platforms lead at AJ Plus. Previously, I worked with Jazeera Media Network, leading their low-tech initiatives. So we did lots of SMS and last mile distribution of content and opening up engagement flows back to the newsroom via very simple technology. AJ Plus is Al Jazeera's new digital entity. We're focused mainly on, we're actually producing content specifically for mobile, and the flagship product is a mobile app on iOS and Android that is built around. It's a very different concept from current apps that are in the market currently, and basically what we are doing at AJ Plus is we're producing content specifically for mobile, but also building up an engagement experience. So it's not about one-way broadcast, but it's actually trying to get feedback, opening up feedback loops to the newsroom, but also allowing the audience to engage with the stories that are being produced. And I think typically what most media organizations have done when attempting to go to mobile is replicating their websites on mobile, and the challenge there is the screen space on mobile. There are lots of challenges on mobile because, one, the attention spans are much lower, and two, the screen sizes are not as big. And people use the mobile phones on the go. I can see some people using the mobile phones right now as I'm talking, and it's the attention spans are very low. So from a content production perspective, and for a media organization like us at Al Jazeera, we're looking at it, we're trying to tackle a problem where you've got people who come in, use their phones, and then drop it, move on to something else, pick up their phones, and do something else. So so that's pretty much what we're doing, and I wouldn't say that we've cracked it yet, but we're attempting to at least find new ways of storytelling, focusing on mobile, simply because the numbers are there. Most people are spending a lot more time on mobile than other types of media, especially the younger generations. And then secondly, it is a growing market, and it's growing exponentially throughout the world. So it is these are really interesting times, and lots of opportunity that is being presented on that end.
Sorry, sir, can I interrupt you for a minute? We're joined by Mr. Mark Frankel. So I'll just connect. So can you hear me? We're joined by Mr. Mark Frankel too. So I'll just add him on. He's on? Welcome, Mr. Mark. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello, Mr. Mark? Mr. Mark Frankel? Hello, Mr. Mark Frankel, can you hear me?
Good, he's on now.
Good morning, Mr. Mark Frankel. We're joined by Mr. Soud Hyder of the Platforms Lead at AJ Plus. And a very warm welcome to this open house. And I'd like to start off with a small introduction to the class. And towards the end, we'll have a small question and answer session where the students would come up and ask their questions. So they start with a small introduction.
Okay.
Yeah. So today we have with us Mr. Mark Frankel, Assistant Editor, Social News at the BBC. He's a journalist with a track record in delivering high-quality content, comprehensive range of experience in political team leadership, and editorial strategy. He's currently helping to shape and deliver a breaking news operation for the BBC across branded social media accounts. Thanks a lot, sir. Mr. Mark?
Yeah, so you want, so I misunderstood. Are you looking for me to say a few words to begin with?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't really understand the purpose behind your gathering, but I'm going to take it that you're all students. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Right. And you are what is because I have never taken part in one of these gatherings before. No one gave me the background or the context. So perhaps you could start by explaining to me why you are all gathered today. Is this a regular thing?
Yes, sir. Yes, it is.
Give me a little bit more of the background as to why you're gathered today and what you normally talk about, and then I can say a few words about what I do. Who wants to give me an introduction?
Could you please repeat it? I'm one of the faculty members here.
Okay, so tell me about what it is you do normally.
This afternoon, we have something called the open house, when we would invite guests from the digital media world, particularly to talk to the students about current happenings and how you work in whatever media you're in. So today we have mobile strategy as the topic of discussion. We're joined by Soud Hyder, who is a program lead at AJ Plus. We've also invited Shubhajit Banerjee of Guardian Mobile. Unfortunately, he's not been able to join us yet. So, you could perhaps share your thoughts. In fact, Soud was just telling us about the way mobile works, AJ Plus, and their strategy, and how they try to make things fit in the little screen when we had the pleasure of your company. So, perhaps you could start off by telling us about the tweet that got us interested in your work today in the first place. So, and then perhaps Soud could comment on it.
Okay, what was it that you were particularly interested in, though, with the social media aspect of what we're doing, or responsive and mobile social media?
No, you had actually posted something on social and mobile today. So my colleague Devdas had seen it, and I understand you had a chat with him on Twitter.
Well, we didn't have a chat, but anyway, I will explain to you what he just invited me to take part. He didn't tell me what the background was. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about. So as I was introduced, I work at the BBC in our main multimedia newsroom in London, which is the largest newsroom, in fact, in Europe, and one of the largest newsrooms in the world. And one of the things that we've tried to come to terms with is the digital revolution that we're all experiencing, which has meant that we are having to make and approach our broadcasting in a very, very different way to the way that we've traditionally done so. In the past, we tended to think of media in terms of separate entities, television, radio, and latterly a website. And I think the big challenge for us as broadcasters is that most of our audience are now consuming our programs, our outputs on the go. They're not sitting down at particular times of the day and saying this is a moment to watch a television news program. They're not thinking about news in a built way with bulletins and so forth. They're wanting it in a responsive way on mobile, in a way that suits them and their busy working lives. So consequently, it's a bit of a challenge because we're a huge organisation, as you all, I'm sure, are aware. And that has meant that we've had to change the way that we work and think about work in a very different way. And from where I sit, my role is to look after the BBC's largest social media accounts in news on a day-to-day basis. I'll have a show of hands in the room. How many of you follow BBC Breaking on Twitter? There's a few hands going up, a few more hands going up. Well, that's good to see. We have a very large following, actually, in India, so it's interesting that there are still some of you in the room who haven't put your hand up, which is a challenge to us still there. But BBC Breaking is our largest Twitter account, has almost 12.5 million followers now, one of the largest news accounts in the world. But we also have a number of other platforms that we're trying to expand. Facebook, BBC News has a very large presence on Facebook, which I know is big in India, in the sense that we can see from our interactions from the public in India that we do very well there. And our biggest page has, again, over 12 million fans. We now have an Instagram channel with approaching 100,000 subscribers. We have a presence on Vine as well, which is growing all the time. We have Google, obviously, as you can see, Google Hangouts that we do. So we're expanding, but this is all very new to us because traditionally the BBC used to do everything through the prism of a television set. So one of the things that I, alongside some colleagues, have done recently is think about how we can make our digital and social media presence more interactive and more immediate. So last week I went with some colleagues to Lebanon, to Beirut, and we worked on a project which we called #BBC Syria War. You can still find quite a lot of the content if you go and look at my Twitter account, or you put in the hashtag into Twitter, BBC Syria War, you'll find quite a lot of the material that we were putting together. And the purpose behind it was a 2-day exercise, was to say there's a major war that's been going on for 3.5 years now, but how has that war been playing out in humanitarian terms? And from where I sit, what are the big challenges in terms of people's ability to communicate with each other using social media in the context of that war? So what I did is I spent 2 days only broadcasting about the situation using social media. So I limited myself to a smartphone, a microphone, and a number of social media accounts. I used WhatsApp, I used Twitter, I used Facebook, I used YouTube for clips, and I tried to encourage my colleagues to put as much material as possible on social media and to post it to those branded social media accounts and their own personal social media accounts as quickly as possible, so that we could try to generate an interactive and engaging discussion with our audience without using traditional platforms, or at least using social media accounts and channels before we went to television, before we went to the website. And it was remarkably successful, and one of the things that we discovered is that the audience really appreciate that sense of immediacy. They wanted to sit down at the end of the day and see a 5-minute television package drawing everything together, but what they particularly liked was the reveal techniques that we applied on social media, where we gave them tidbits of information through the day, allowed them to subscribe to things, allowed them to interact with us, or whether it's on Twitter or Facebook. We ran Q&As on Facebook and Twitter. We also used a number of other platforms, as I said. And I think that's going to become much more of a model for the way that we interact with our audience on big events, hour to hour, at the BBC, and I think it will become a model for many, many other new programs. So that's a very long-winded introduction from me.
Thank you very much, Mark. Do you have time to take a few questions afterwards, and just how long can you be with us?
Yeah, sure.
So before that, just let me go back to Soud. So sorry for interrupting you, Soud. Hello, can you hear me, Soud?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, could you explain a little bit more about the features of AJ Plus? Particularly the interesting feature about the card system, the stacking of card system, where you do an explainer, you do a quiz, a poll, and an explanatory, and put the story in context. How is it working for you? What did you get this idea, and how effective it is? So do you think in terms of engaging with your community, please?
Okay, so I mean the whole concept of AJ Plus, as I said earlier, is we're trying to create an experience around mobile, and we're not looking at just producing and distributing content, but we're also looking for cues in which we can engage with the audience. So the actual the actual design of the app was looking for different ways. When we're designing the app, we're looking for different ways in which to engage the audience. In some cases, we're doing really well. Some cases, we're just doing okay. But so the whole stacks and cards. I mean, this is not a new concept. Lots of other media organizations are using it, and non-media organizations also using it. I mean, it's a UX paradigm that's heavily in use now. If you look at the likes of Vox, they're going heavy with cards and stacks. So the main point here is we feel that stories never die. They just keep on getting retold and refreshed. So the whole point of the stacks is we use stacks to represent, and update stories as to what is happening every day through a collection of different cards. And we've got, our main, our core content is videos, and we've got explainers, we've got short videos, and we've got what we call long form, but it's pretty much short documentaries, which are about on average between 8 and 10 minutes long. And so that's our core content.
What's interesting to me, I don't want to stop your flow, but one of my observations, and it's a question to you actually, is that my feeling is that despite people's attention spans and the penetration of social media generally into the media landscape, that long-form journalism, long-form journalism has actually got a very rosy future. And that there are an enormous number of people who are turning to social and digital media in order to consume long-form journalism. Is that your perception as well through your work?
Yes, I mean definitely. I mean, if you look at the stats coming out from YouTube, look at what Vice has done on long-form. It is looking very very promising. So there is a time and space for long form, and I think it's just figuring out what the niche is and what the audience wants. So generally not repurposing a TV documentary for digital or web isn't necessarily the right way, but there is right way for the audiences. So yeah, so we've got a mix of different lot of engagement, what we call engagement pieces. So the art cards, the quizzes, the conversation cards, and there's pretty much conversation starters that kind of stir up some sort of conversation with the audience, and we wrap it around the content to provide an experience that is slightly different from what other media organizations are putting out. Well, the beauty about the stacks is the stacks pretty much never die. So they just go back to the end of the queue, and we keep on refreshing and featuring stacks when a story comes up. So like today, one of our top stories is the U.S. immigration, and this has always been an issue, over the last since Obama joined office, and we've been since we launched, we've covered the stories in one way or another. But what we simply did was, when Obama gave us the press release, we had new content that was coming up. We simply refreshed the stack with new cards, and probably took out some cards that are outdated, and pushed the card out to the front of the queue, so that it's featured, and people consume the content as and when stuff is happening, and more content was being produced. So that's pretty much the premise of AJ Plus and the stacks and cards.
Mark?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick on something Soud left out. You have something called Instafacts, where you pretty effectively use Instagram short videos, and during the last elections, and your one of the colleagues, Trisha Barrett, it was very popular in the successfully tried out WhatsApp here in India. So, what do you think, and how do you measure the engagement? Are they based on the same premise as Soud just explained what AJ Plus is trying to do in a short form? Just bearing in mind the shortening attention span of the audience. Are they based on, or do you have a separate policy for the content that you push on the mobile or on the web, on the television? Do they have different perceptions and policies in terms of content?
Yeah, we launched Instafacts, which is obviously a 15-second video on Instagram about a year ago. In fact, we've rebranded it as BBC News Shorts more recently, because one of the things we're very keen not to do is associate all BBC News short-form video with one social media platform. So we're quite keen that short-form video is successful. We want to use it on Vine, we want to use it online, we want to use it on WhatsApp. So we're not limiting ourselves to Instagram. That's the first point I should make. But what we thought was what's proved very successful for us is in our storytelling, we've noticed that younger audiences consume news and are very interested in news, but they're put off lengthy bulletins and longer video, and what they particularly like and were drawn to is this sense of a short, sharp, 2-3 stories wrapped with text in 15 seconds, instantly shareable, very kind of has a sense of immediacy to it as well. So it was a very simple concept. We thought we have huge access through our own journalism, our own broadcast accounts, our journalists who are gathering news on our behalf, but also through partner agencies who are filing great content to us. And if we applied that to a 15-second format and said that 2-3 times a day we would just pick out the biggest news stories, wrap it with simple text, and deliver it through Instagram, we could build up a potential referral base for a younger audience to come back and consume more of our content. I think that is one of the big challenges for all media organisations at the moment, is most of us are losing, hemorrhaging a younger audience, because, as I said at the beginning in my introduction, there is so much information out there. There are so many people who are willing to consume news on different platforms. They don't necessarily see CNN, Sky, ABC, Times of India. These are big monolithic organisations that have existed for many years. But for most people, especially of a younger generation, they want news on the go immediately. And if they can get it through YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, they're prepared to go there first. So we need to, part of the thinking behind Instafacts and now BBC Shorts was, how can we develop and evolve a relationship with a younger, more mobile, more tech-savvy audience who are willing to come and consume BBC News, but need to be encouraged to do so through the prism of somewhere that they feel more familiar with in the first place. And I mean, I think it's been quite successful.
Okay, just to add on to Mark's point, I think the key is to be where your audience is and trying to figure out where your audience is, and that's what Mark said. They started out on Instagram just to trial it out, but now they've got a whole franchise and they distribute content in lots of different platforms. I think that's pretty much the challenge, and figuring out what formats work for your audience and trying to find out where your audience is, because your audience will never be on one place, and the beauty or the curse of social media is platforms keep on evolving with time, and you'll never have one platform being well, now we're kind of seeing a trend with Facebook being a dominant platform, but there's still new applications, especially if you look at on messaging, the likes of WeChat, Lime, WhatsApp. Like, these applications come out from out of nowhere, and within a very short period of time, they command a very, very large audiences. And if that's where your audience is, and they're spending lots of time there, you need to find them, and you need to get your content onto your audience's eyes within a very short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think, just to follow up on that, I mean, I think this is absolutely central to the future of social and digital news for all of us. I mean, in the past, it was all about building one presence in your most traditional area, your most successful area. Now, I think it is entirely about being where the audience is, and you have to balance up this sense of referral with engagement where they choose to be. And that, I mean, that's another big challenge at the centre of this, is that I could put a lot of content on a BBC News Facebook page and say to my audience, here's a 30-second video, come back to the BBC News website if you want to see the full thing. Now, that could be successful, and it has been successful to us, but, for us to some extent. But equally, if they don't want to come back to our BBC News website because they're very keen to stay on Facebook and get everything that they want from Facebook, we've got to be prepared to engage with that audience on Facebook. And this isn't about making Facebook into a broadcast company. It's about saying that we have an audience that is already there. They enjoy our content. Let's give it to them there, and not be completely hung up on this idea of them having to consume it wherever we happen to feel works for us. So you've got to, but at the same time, you've got to balance that referral traffic, because we don't want to kill our website. We don't want to kill our programs. We want people to still come to the BBC News website and see other additional content. So it's a fascinating kind of balancing act. How much do you want to drive that traffic, drive that audience to somewhere where you have traditionally been strong and where there is additional content? How much do you want them to remain where they feel comfortable, because that's where they're likely to engage with you most? And just to add, I mean, just on chat apps, I think one of the fascinating things for me is that we've been quite late on the game in chat apps at the BBC, but we've actually become quite adept now. We've got a WhatsApp presence with a BBC account there, and we've got a lot of presence online as well. There's probably our two biggest chat app BBC News presences at the moment. And with Line, for example, we only launched a matter of sort of a month or so ago, and we've already got over 300,000 subscribers. And that's through very limited publicity, just because we know that our audiences are evolving in that direction. And that's a big challenge to us, because these are not platforms that are set up for broadcasting. WhatsApp was not created as a broadcast organization. I mean, it's a private messaging apps, a platform, and people go to WhatsApp as they go to Line in order to share content with each other, not with broadcast news organizations. So again, there's another challenge there. We want to be there. We want to signpost the best of our content to an audience that are on those platforms to say, look, you might like this, here's a bit more, here's a link, a URL, explore us at your leisure elsewhere. But at the same time, we need to be careful not to invade people's space so that they feel that we are damaging trust in their ability to communicate with one another in a private environment.
Mark, Soud, can we just throw the floor open for the questions from the students, please?
Yep.
Sure.
Hi, my question is that when Al Jazeera started this stream, which calls itself television program, a web community with a global TV show, it was a novel concept. Do you see other channels jumping onto the bandwagon of something like the stream, which is essentially something curated by social media, but which has a show on television? What I'm asking is, do you see more of the convergent programs coming up on televisions and vice versa on social media as well?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off on that. I mean, yes. A short answer, I think it's very innovative. I think it's been very successful for them. There are challenges for media organisations with open stream journalism like that in terms of content curation, the ability that the audience has to sort of start delivering the news on your behalf, potentially. But I mean, one of the things that we've tried at the BBC, I don't know whether many of you have watched a programme called Outside Source, which is broadcast on BBC World Service as well as on BBC World Television. And what we're trying to do there with the programme is to bring in a social and digital media audience right into the heart of our radio and television news as a constant, as a sort of real-time conversation as the programme is unfolding. So, you know, the programme is tweeting and it has a live page now and brings in social media content right into the television programme and into the radio programme. It's a kind of behind the scenes, how we are working, what news is happening when and how we're covering it. I think that has a great future to it, and we need to think about new sort of iterations of that, because I think there's a fascination on the part of the audience with what happens behind the scenes, and there's also a fascination from our point of view in terms of how the audience is engaging in real-time terms with our news. So, I mean, I think AJ are being very innovative, and I think there is a future to it, but I think the real challenge for all of us is how much we want to give the audience a kind of free rein. You know, at heart, you know, I work for a news organisation that prides itself on its objectivity, its impartiality, its trust with the audience. We need to maintain that. We need to maintain our values whilst opening up our journalism to some extent to the audience to participate. And there's a challenge there. There's a real challenge there. We want to engage, we want to feedback, we want to involve our audience, but we also know that the audience comes to us because they trust, they believe that we are telling them things that are objective, impartial, and honest.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. My question is to Mr. Soud. Thank you, Mr. Mark. My question is to Mr. Soud. Sir, could you tell us more about the production process in AJ Plus? And is there a separate team that works on this?
Okay, I'll answer your second question first. Yes, it's a separate team. One of the reasons for it to be separate was to give it the space to rethink how where journalism should be headed, and rethinking the whole news production process. Yes, it's still one big experiment. We're still seeing early signs of success. In terms of production, we didn't go heavy. At least we've just started out, so we're not heavy on pretty much day-to-day, up to the second news. What we try to do is provide context over stories that are happening so maybe a story broke about 3-4 hours ago, and then would have content catered towards covering what's either happening in the last few couple of hours, or we plan ahead on big events. So we know, like today, we knew Obama was going to have this speech about the U.S. immigration. He was going to make some big announcements. So that's what we kind of specialize on, and we're starting out as providing context to big stories, and sometimes to untold stories. If you look at our long-form content, they're all about stories that pretty much don't make it through the wires on environmental issues, on stuff that's happening in different parts of the world. And so how the production is structured is we've got what we call a real-time team, although it's not technically it's not real-time, but it's equivalent to the short form, and they produce anything between 30 seconds to about a minute worth of content. This gets seeded onto Facebook, Instagram, and all our videos make it into the app, and some videos make it onto YouTube as well. And then we've got the context team, which pretty much work on the explainers. And there's if you look through our content, these are the heavy animated stories, trying to break down complex issues into a way that people can understand within probably 3 minutes, and highly visualized. So high value production content. And then we've got the long form, which internally we refer to as stories, and these are documentaries that are about between 7 to 10 minutes. And on average, we have 2 a week of the long form documentaries. We have probably about 3 context pieces, 3 explainers a week, and about 4 to 6 shorts daily. So that's pretty much how the teams work. And then, so we've got the content producers, and we've got the engagement producers who now look through the content, and they produce infographics, art cards, and engagement pieces to the quizzes. And we go through the app, we've got quizzes, we've got what we call conversation cards. There's a whole engagement team that look through seeding the content and getting people, the audience, to engage on the content, and getting the audience's feedback, and driving this back through to the newsroom. So just in case there was an angle that was missed on the stories, at least it gets to the news desk, and the editors make a decision, the executive producers make a decision as to whether or not more content needs to be commissioned to tell the story.
Thank you.
And it's work in progress. I mean, it's still early days, so we're still working on it, trying to perfect it, but it's all uncharted territory at this point in time.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Hello, Ma. Hello, sir. My name. Hello, Ma. Hello, sir. My name is Praveen, and I wanted to ask: the moment you enter a professional organization, are you supposed to have a separate professional, leave a separate professional imprint on social media? Say, for instance, probably before joining a professional organization, I can have an opinion on anything that I want to say on Twitter or Facebook. But then after joining an organization, I can't say those things. So is it important to create a separate, say, a Facebook and Twitter profile after you join an organization? What do you think about it?
Yeah, it's a very good question. As I said, the BBC's position on things is, we pride our impartiality on our objectivity. What we say to our social media journalists, or any journalist, in fact, who decides to go onto social media and broadcast or use it as a broadcast platform, is that they need to be sensible. They need to remember that they are journalists and that they work for the BBC. That doesn't mean that you can't have a view or an opinion about anything at all. I mean, we need to be sensible. It means that you need to be careful in what you say and how you present it. It means that you need to steer clear of political views, of views that might compromise your journalism. If you're a technology journalist, or you're a science journalist, or an education journalist, you need to make sure you steer clear of having a position on things. But it doesn't mean that you can't support a football team or a cricket team, or you can't go to the theatre or the cinema and see something and say, I enjoyed that, and this is something I like, or I've read something interesting. But so, I think it's being sensible. It's saying, we're all human beings, we all have our interests, but when we're working as journalists and we're using social media to broadcast as part of our job, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or however you choose to whatever platform you choose to use, you've got to maintain a certain separation and be aware that you work for an organisation that prides itself on maintaining that objectivity and that impartiality. So all our journalists are schooled in that. When they join us, when they open accounts that have BBC in the name of the account, whether it's a Twitter account or a Facebook page or anything else for that matter, we go through that again with them. We're very clear with them. We also have quite stringent sort of compliance procedures in terms of making sure that accounts have an oversight, that there is moderation on comments, that we don't, that things are not a free-for-all, that we don't simply allow people to open things on social media and not monitor them. Because, we pride ourselves in our ability to maintain a trust with the audience. And that's I think, important to everyone who works at the BBC. I should add, by the way, that I've only probably got another 5 minutes, so if that's all right.
Yeah. So just to add on to Mark's comments, I think different organizations approach social media policy differently. But as I said, I think everyone has the right to their opinion. But as a journalist, I think there is an expectation not only from your employers but mainly from the audience in terms of your integrity. So you can't be reporting on an issue and have a byline saying one thing, and then on your personal handles saying something that's totally opposite. So that you need that integrity and balance has to be there. And there are expectations from the audience for journalists to be journalists, and yes, they should have opinions, but the audience is carefully looking through what journalists are saying, and obviously journalists do amass lots of social media capital, so it's a road that has to be treaded carefully by anyone who's going to be a digital journalist and has a presence on social media.
I should just add, I've been following. You've all been tweeting merrily as we've been talking, which is all fine. But the one danger of social media, and especially of Hangouts with a distance, is that facts can get misconstrued. So let me just be absolutely clear to everyone. Firstly, my position is I'm assistant editor of social news at the BBC. I'm not the lead for BBC World on social media, as some of you are suggesting on Twitter. My title is assistant editor of social news at the BBC. That means that I have day-to-day responsibility for some of these Twitter accounts that I mentioned, like BBC Breaking and the BBC News Facebook page. Just listen very carefully to what we're both saying, because I think there's one of the great dangers of social media, and especially of the Hangout medium, is that things get discussed. You take an interpretation of what's discussed, put that on social media, and then suddenly the two of us get represented with views that we haven't actually articulated. So just be careful of that. Make sure that when you do tweet about what we're saying, that you've got us entirely accurate. Otherwise, you start a hair racing on something that isn't true.
Hello, Mark. Hello, sir. I'm Akshay. I have two questions for you guys. First question is there a chance of sensationalizing news stories if they are being pushed into the social media platform? If so, does that affect the credibility of the news story? And my second question is, 5 years down the line, where do you think AJ Plus will stand? What is going to be the future of AJ Plus? What is going to be how AJ Plus would have developed 5 years down the line?
If I got your first question right, you talked about sensationalizing, is that right?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. No, there is a danger with anything and everything that we do, especially with the kind of immediacy and a sense that social media is all about the moment, the sort of virality of a story. You can get drawn into sensationalization, and I think that's a risk for all of us. We try at the BBC to ensure that what we put on our accounts is contextualized, that we don't write headlines that are just clickbait, that we signpost to our audience why something is interesting and why something, they may want to delve further into it. And we're not in the habit of just putting journalism out there that enables people to, how can I put it, interest themselves in the emotional content without there being a wider sort of news element to it. Now, sometimes that line can get a little bit blurred. For example, you get footage of pandas giving birth for the first time, and you put the video on a Facebook page. What's the news dimension of that? The news dimension is, isn't it amazing? These animals you rarely get insight into that kind of process. But what we were actually seeing is something that is a very emotional experience and very little more. But I think what we then do is we'll wrap the video around the context of the story and say to our audience, well, here's 30 seconds of a video, but here's also the fact that this is happening for the first time. What does it mean? Here's a link to the science on the story and so on. So we're always thinking about how we can draw our audience further and deeper into a story, and not just giving them the sensation of a particular moment. Sorry, and your second question was around?
5 years down the line,
yes.
AG Plus developed.
Yeah, but I struggle to know what's going to happen 6 months down the line rather than 5 years down the line. It's a challenge to all of us because the technology is moving so fast to keep abreast of what exactly is a priority. I think that these kind of monolithic structures are going to break down over time, and we are going to have to involve our audience more and more in our storytelling. How we do that, what apps we use, whether it is entirely mobile, whether it's a mix of mobile and desktop, whether we do things that are bringing television and video even closer together in terms of interactive content. I think there's a lot up for grabs in terms of the technology. I think the only caveat I would say is that my perspective is that the audience still want a trusted guide. They like the idea of being more involved. They like the idea of a more responsive and mobile presence and the technology that goes with that. But they still find there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of uncurated noise out there. My feeling, and this is just my own perspective on it, is that there is still a place for organizations to guide and trust, to work with the audience on what's important, what's less important, what's valid, what's less valid, and so on. And I think that will remain for some years to come.
Thank you, Mark. So may I know what are your thoughts on this question?
Okay. Yeah, so on the issue of sensationalism, I think sensationalism has always been there. Ever since the print days, and certain media houses thrived under sensationalism. There is there seems to be a market for it, and there's a valid business model for it to work. And the only difference that digital has made, especially social media, is the degree of sensationalism has increased exponentially, and it seems to be eroding into the core values of journalism. So as Mark said, a lot of care has to be taken. And I'll give you a story last week on there's a viral video about the Syrian children who were saving each other, and then it turned out to be a parody, and there were debates when the story broke, and credible news organizations actually went to the story, published it, and then it turns out to be a fake. So how far are people going to go just to get the hits? And I think now the problem is what people, I think, this goes up to maybe probably senior management and the people who actually make the decisions. The metrics tend to be: how many hits are you getting? How many retweets are you getting? How many shares are you getting? And that's making people making newsrooms people in newsrooms make decisions in haste, and people in a hurry to publish content without properly validating it, and that's adding to the problem. So hopefully, I think there is room for media houses with authority and the publishers with authority. So hopefully things are going to settle, and the people who want to make a living out of sensationalism, that will always be there, and it's always been there. But there is room for credible news, and I think that's what most of the big media organizations thrive to. Even some of the small local media organizations, that's what they thrive to. I think there is still room for core journalism, as I would say. It's just reinventing itself to work on the digital space. Second question on the future of AJ Plus. 5 years ahead is really hard to project. Lots of changes, but at least I can tell you from the immediate couple of months, I see apps changing the same way that the desktop changed. People no longer go to the home pages. Like we've got this saying with my team saying home pages are dead, and people no longer stumble on stories onto the homepage. They no longer go to bbcworld.com or aljazeera.com, as it end up stumbling on stories on social media most of the time. And right now the biggest trend is on messaging, and then they get to a story and then they go to other. It's a rabbit hole, and they keep on reading other stories. So a lot of traffic is coming from social recommendations. So I think the same thing is going to happen with mobile, especially now that it's got deep linking. So you could have a web link that takes you to the mobile app, to the story. I think people going to the app every day in the morning, or at a certain time at night, or when they're commuting, those days are not numbered. And I tend to think this is going to start petering off towards the end of this year, because you get people have the phones are getting much more capable and more powerful. So the average user probably has 50 or 60 apps. So competition for the audience is extremely high. So people are going to be stumbling in through smart pathways, either through notifications, through links on social media, and I think for us as content creators and publishers, we need to think about much more intuitive ways to trigger people to get onto the content that we are producing. And there's no one way that's going to win. So that's why you have to try out lots of different things: messaging, social media, push notifications, and I don't know what's going to come up next. But it's a difficult question to answer, because the future changes so fast. but it's all about figuring out how many different pathways you've got to your content, and trying to address and opening up these pathways to your different verticals in your audience, because the people who use messaging are probably slightly different from the people who would click on a social media update from their friends or from your page.
Yeah, can I just come back just very briefly on the Syrian example that you started with, because that was actually something that we were very heavily involved with at the BBC. A Hero Boy video, which proved to be not a fake, but it was a embellishment of a story. It was a sensationalization, really a very good example of that. I think that there is a very interesting thing which is evolving, which is that cinematography, in a way, this was a film director, is sort of moving through YouTube into the realms of news and trying to dramatize news events. Now here you have almost like a sort of, a fascinating sort of coming together of one man's sort of vision of what's going on in Syria and a sort of a set of news priorities and news events. And for the space of many hours, you had news organisations openly discussing whether they had stumbled across this most amazing video which showed something that it patently obviously didn't show. We have a team at BBC who pride themselves in verification, and they're called our UGC Hub. They worked with another team we've got, which is our BBC Trending team. Our BBC Trending team look at video and social media content generally in terms of what people are talking about, how trends are evolving on social media. And they looked at this and raised questions and tracked back the video and eventually discovered that it wasn't what it purported to be, on the tape. And we did a story about it. But there were a number of media organisations who ran with it without questioning it. And I think that there is, just as there is a danger, as we've been talking about, in terms of this sort of surge, this appetite for click-throughs and appetite for shares and so on, which can push us all into putting content that is just emotive without being properly contextualized. Though there is a great appetite for finding something on a news story that nobody else has discovered, and putting it out there before it's properly checked out, before it's verified. And we've got to stop that. At every stage, we've got to remain true to our journalistic values, ask questions, question what we're seeing, question what's being produced, not abandon it for the sake of saying that we've got something that is sensational because we happen to have stumbled across it. Are we nearly at the end? Because I think this might have to be the last one for me. Is that all right?
Hello. So can you hear me?
Hello.
So mobile apps are very instant. It has a lot of threat of misinterpretation. Social media is accessible to everyone, so it can easily mislead the audience. So what do you think about it?
I didn't get the first part of the question. You might have to repeat that.
So mobile apps are very instant and it has a lot of threat of misinterpretation. So what do you think about the accessibility is large? Large audience can access it. So what do you think about it can mislead the audience, the people?
Okay, I want to ask you to repeat it again. I think the line was a bit noisy.
So mobile apps are very instant. It has a lot of threat of misinterpretation. And social media is more accessible and it can easily mislead the audience. What do you think about it?
Okay, so I think the question was mobile apps are instant and there is a possibility of misinterpretation, right?
Yes, sir. Yes,
I mean,
sir.
yep. Okay. So, like any other, media pieces, or like any other forms of media, apps, digital print, that room for misinterpretation would always be there. But I think the what the same I think the same notion of making your stories clear. I think it all boils down to how the story is told. And if the story is told in a clear way that projects the facts and doesn't leave anything open, then I don't think there is any room for misinterpretation or any danger to journalism through using mobile apps. I think it's the same limitations that you'd have on print, on TV, on radio, are the same limitations that you'd have on mobile apps. The case could be made that at least for with apps and radio, this apps in particular, it's actually there, the room for self-correction and the room to be criticized by the audience is actually much greater than in other forms of media, specifically TV and radio. So I think digital is built around around social communities, and that self-correcting would always happen. So in the comment threads, or a blogger is going to pick it up and say, hey, this is the link, this is what this guy said, screenshots or whatever. So there's no hiding away from it, and I don't think that there are any dangers with people going through or putting in lots of effort into digital for journalism.
Yeah, Mark, Soud, thank you very much indeed for being with us. It's been very insightful, and we enjoyed it. And sorry for just putting into you, Mark, in just at a short notice, and thank you very much. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Nice having you. And I think it's an exciting time for media in India. Hope to see lots of your work from the students there, and I'll look forward to engaging with them on social media.
Yeah, likewise. It was interesting. Nice to meet you all, and yeah, look forward to hearing from you more on social media. All the best.
Thank you.